Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started for today. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Northwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, we welcome you to today's webinar, The Journey to Use Medications Optimally to Support Recovery with Pat Deegan. Today is part one of a two-part series on this topic, and part two, as you may have already seen, will be held July 15th, so just put that in your calendars, July 15th, 3 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern. We're really grateful that so many of you could join us to learn more about this important topic, very near and dear to many of our hearts. We're really excited to share the information today, even maybe more excited to just have some conversation with you. So we'll have some time for some facilitated discussion afterward. My name is Maria Monroe DeVita, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Akanksha Vaswani Bai, who will be facilitating today's discussion after Pat's presentation, somewhere in between there. So real quick, just wanted to give you a little background on the MHTTC before we get started. So the MHTTC network is a nationwide network that is supported by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. Our purpose includes disseminating and implementing evidence-based practices for mental health issues across the workforce. Our goals are to support mental health related evidence-based practices, heighten the awareness, knowledge, and skills of the workforce, foster regional and national alliances, and provide and connect you to free training and technical assistance like we have today. Now, just a quick thing about our Northwest MHTTC, which is sponsoring this today. The Northwest MHTTC is based at the University of Washington in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. We provide training and technical assistance in evidence-based practices to Region 10, which includes Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. Our specific area of focus is evidence-based practices for serious mental health issues such as psychosis. However, we also provide training on a variety of topics, including integrated care, suicide prevention, diversity and equity issues, school mental health, peer support, trauma-informed approaches, and many others. Our target workforce includes behavioral health and primary care providers, school and social service staff, and others whose work has the potential to improve behavioral health outcomes for individuals with or at risk of developing serious mental illnesses. And how do we fulfill this mission? Well, we provide these live events like this webinar, which we will also post later. So we're recording today, virtual learning communities, free self-paced online courses, newsletters, and then our resource library on our website, as well as connection to other training centers and events. To find out more about our goals and training opportunities, you can visit our website and sign up for our newsletter. Real quick, also wanted to make our land acknowledgement. The Northwest MHTTC honors the many cultures and lands across our region spanning Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. We want to acknowledge that the Northwest MHTTC, based in Seattle, sits on the traditional land of the Duwamish and Coast Salish peoples, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Now let's talk a bit about language. It is our intention to always be mindful of using language that promotes recovery and honors culture. We encourage all participants to use language that demonstrates respect for a person's dignity and worth. It is consistent with recovery-oriented practices, promotes treatment environments that foster respect, human dignity, and hope. We also want to next review the logistics regarding communication in today's webinar. Due to the large audience, all attendees are muted and are not appearing on video. Messages in the chat are visible to everyone in the webinar. The presentation, as we said earlier, is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be made available on our website in a few weeks. And you'll receive an email from Zoom with a link to where we post these resources on our website. I think we're also putting in the chat today. You'll receive an email within 2 weeks on how to access a certificate of attendance, but there are no formal CEUs available for this particular webinar. If you're experiencing any technical issues, please use the chat and our MHTTC staff will assist. We will be monitoring the Q&A box to facilitate answering as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, please type them there at any point through the presentation, and just try not to put them into the chat because then we can't copy and paste them into the Q&A for you. Our team will moderate and share questions with the presenter. We might provide a short written response during the webinar or field them live as time allows, but we will do our best to get an answer to you regarding your questions. And then lastly, your feedback is crucial to our work, so we would appreciate your response to a very short survey that takes just a few minutes after the session. Our team will share that link by the chat box today and by email reminder through Zoom tomorrow. We're required by SAMHSA to conduct the survey, but we really appreciate your feedback about the session and to plan future sessions. And your participation helps to keep free training coming, so we take them very seriously around here. SAMHSA sponsors this work, but does not take any official position on its content. And now, after all of that, I go to the most important part, which is to introduce our presenter for today. Our presenter is one of my all-time heroes in this field, so it is all the more personally exciting for me to have the opportunity to introduce her to you. Her mission is to help activate and empower mental health services users in their own recovery and to provide peer supporters and clinicians with the know-how to support people in their recovery journey. She is uniquely positioned to fulfill her vocation because she was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a teenager, went on to get her doctorate in clinical psychology, and today leads a company run by and for people in recovery. Now I'll turn it over to our presenter, Dr. Pat Deegan.
Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, here we go. Oops. There we go. Well, hi, everybody out there. I can't see you, but I believe you're there. And it's really an honor to have a chance to join you. Today, I'm beaming in from Massachusetts. And I just want to start by acknowledging that this has been a very interesting and challenging 15 months or so that we've all been through. And I know that many of you continue to work day in and day out with the people that you serve, and that it really makes a difference what you do. You're out there, you're helping to save lives, and not only that, but you're helping to support people in their recovery. And people respect and also are deeply grateful for the service that you provide. And when you provide that service with a deep sense of caring and compassion for the dignity of the human being that we're working with, then that's the common ground of our shared humanity. And it is the root of all beautiful recovery-oriented work. So I want to thank you. I know it's not been easy. And as I like to say, I know that the reason you're showing up at work today and you'll show up again tomorrow, it's really not about the money. I like to recall that there are far easier ways to make a living. And yet we choose to come back. And I believe the reason we choose to come back to work in the morning, even after a rough day, even after a budget cut, even after a downsizing, we come back. And the reason that we do this is because I think that we are, as individuals, called to the work. And the reason we're called to the work is because somewhere in the course of our own lives, each and every one of us on this call today has been through some sort of passage, a time when life knocked us down, when we perhaps didn't see it coming, a time maybe when you were growing up with an alcoholic parent, perhaps it was the loss of a loved one, a divorce. I'm not sure what your passage was, but I know that you couldn't keep coming to work each day without having made your passage, without having been able to move through a transformative time. And the very thing that knocked you down and that you thought maybe you'd never stand up again, that very thing somehow didn't consume you or destroy you, but you came out the other side of it with a sense of being transformed, a sense of being different, less likely perhaps to judge other people because perhaps you've made your own mistakes. I'm not sure exactly what the gift is that you bear, when you come to work each day, but part of what it is a deep and abiding sense of hope that no matter how rough today is in the lives of the people that you're serving, you arrive at work with hope. Not like the guy at Dunkin' Donuts who's just kind of there to make the donuts, right? Because then it's game over, right? It's not how it works in the human services. We show up human-hearted. And the only way we can do that when we're working with people with such challenges and complex needs is that we know that human life can regenerate itself, even from the ashes, right? And so we know that not because so much we read it in a textbook, no matter what our degree, right? It's because we've lived it ourselves. And so showing up human-hearted in these human services is the key to doing this work. And that's what my life has been about for the last 30 years or more, is saying, it is possible to build tools, to build ways of understanding that empower us to be more human each and every day when we show up, and to recognize that the person who's coming for services, the person who's showing up in the next hour and a half for an appointment, is not the problem. That human being is part of the solution. And that can be really challenging sometimes when we meet a person who seems to be really struggling hard, right? And it can be difficult to just share some common ground with that human being and say, this person in front of me, they're not a schizophrenic, they're not a bipolar, they're not a borderline. There's a person here, not an illness. And I've got to find my recovery partner. One of the easiest ways we can do that is by saying to people, what do you already know how to do that helps? Because to struggle with mental health challenges doesn't mean we just lay around being passively afflicted, right? I'm suffering from mental illness. I always was bugged by that term. I don't like it. I didn't lay around suffering. I was actively trying to do something about it. And it wasn't always the most adaptive thing, like screaming back at voices, perhaps. But by gosh, that's at least a way to try to manage what can be a difficult experience, right? And so the people that we're working with are part of the solution. They're not the problem, right? And that when we can find our recovery partner, right, then we're on our way to doing really good recovery-oriented work. And so that's why it's such a pleasure to bring to you today this class, which is part one of some work that I'm just rolling out called The Journey to Use Meds Optimally to Support Recovery. And I can tell you that the journey to use medications optimally to support recovery is a whole lot more than learning to take medications on schedule, to take pills on time, or to get my shot on time. The journey to use meds is exactly that. It's a journey that takes place over time, and it's a whole lot more than taking pills on schedule. So let's start at the end and ask ourselves, what does optimal use of medication look like, right? And what I say is that optimal use of medications to support recovery, what it looks like, in many ways, it looks like a regular day. So we need to imagine a person who's working at their job. Imagine two friends playing chess in a park. Imagine a student learning to make a custard at culinary school. That's really what optimal use of medication looks like, right? So optimal use of medicine means finding that really sweet spot where using medication to manage mental health challenges, the meds fade into the background and living life takes center stage, at least on most days. Sometimes not all the time, but on most days. It means that we're using the fewest number of meds at the lowest effective dose. And importantly, it does not necessarily mean that we are symptom-free. Instead, it means having developed expertise in using self-care and supports along with meds to help manage and minimize our mental health challenges. So optimal use, a person who's using meds optimally is a person who knows their personal reason for using meds. That using meds because my parents make me or because staff make me take them is not optimal use of medication. Optimal use of meds means that medicine is experienced by the individual as working in ways that matter to me. Taking meds that don't seem to be helpful to the individual is not optimal use. Optimal use means having found an acceptable and livable trade-off between the health risks and the benefits, as well as the effects and the side effects of medicine. Optimal use means that our beliefs and the story we tell ourselves about who we are aligned with the reality of being a person who uses psychiatric medicine. It means having accepted, at least for now, the choice to use medication. And for some of us, this is a very uneasy piece. The desire to be completely off meds might still be compelling. But as a new day comes up tomorrow, taking med becomes not the goal, but rather taking meds becomes the means to the life that I want for myself. So that could be another title of this presentation, using the journey to use meds to help me get the life that I want, right? So using psych meds, as I said, to support recovery is way more than learning to swallow pills on schedule. It's way, way more than being medication compliant. It's a journey, and it unfolds over time. And on the course of that journey over time, there are a number of identifiable challenges that I'm going to be sharing with you. And the good news, the really good news, is that we, as people working in behavioral health, can support individuals as they pass through these challenges on their journey to use meds optimally to get the life they want. So what I'm asking you to do, in essence, is to bracket or jettison the binary construct of compliance and non-compliance, adherence and non-adherence. Frankly, I think that creates power struggles, and it's not terribly helpful. And often we're wrong about it. I'm asking you instead to imagine that using meds optimally is a journey. And the reason that's so powerful is once we make that, let that thought begin to sink in, it helps us shift our focus from getting people to take their meds. How do we get the person to take their meds? To supporting people through the challenges of using meds optimally to get the life that they want. And that, to me, is a radical, disruptive, and transformative shift in thinking about how we can work to support people and their use of meds to get the life they want. So briefly, I want to touch on the 9 thematic challenges on this journey to use, the journey to get to optimal use, right? So, and the one thing I want to say is I'm going to show you these challenges and say a word about them, but they're not necessarily a linear journey, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. People skip all around, and you can experience more than one at the same time sometimes. And not only that, but some people don't experience certain ones. So it really is a very individualized journey for sure. All right, so one challenge on this journey is what I call the passivity challenge. And the challenge here is moving from passively taking meds, right? You take them kind of, and then you wait for the cure, to actively using medication as one tool among many tools that support recovery. Another challenge is the challenge of implicit racial bias. Now, this is a challenge that many Black, Indigenous, and people of color experience in their efforts to get truly individualized, evidence-based treatment from white team members. And many of us who are white team members have implicit racial biases that interfere and often mean that folks are not getting the care that's optimal for them. Another challenge on the journey is the self-medicating challenge. And of course, this is a pervasive challenge for many, and it's the challenge of addressing if and how substance use is affecting recovery. Then there's the meds helpful challenge. And this is the challenge of trying to figure out if meds are helping me in ways that matter to me, not in ways that matter to my mom, not in ways that matter to the group home, ways that matter to me. Then there is the redefining self challenge. And this is the really, really tough challenge of grappling with the idea that sometimes meds change me in ways I don't like. And am I willing to shift into the me on medicine, or do I reject that as me? Very tough challenge, very prevalent. The trade-off challenge. This is the challenge of balancing the risks and the benefits, the wanted and the unwanted effects of psychiatric meds. And it includes the questions about how meds are going to affect my health, as well as the whole issue of unwanted effects and side effects. Then there's the the motivation challenge. And the motivation challenge is the challenge of trying to find my own personal motivation for using meds. Then there's the med fatigue challenge. And this challenge is the challenge of being over-medicated on too much or too many different medications that don't seem to work particularly well. And then the exploration challenge. And this is the challenge of figuring out how best to manage symptoms, right? So these are the challenges that we'll be discussing over our 2 meetings together. And what I've done is created a worksheet. And it is a self-report, if you will. And it captures the 9 challenges we just touched on, as well as a couple of other little like logistical challenge, like affording copays. And what I want to have you think about is rather than waiting for people to, finally stop taking meds because I'm not motivated, to stop taking meds because I don't experience them as helpful, why don't we meet people upstream? Why don't we be proactive in our care? Why don't we recognize that I don't know anybody who doesn't experience some challenges in using meds? Okay, some of these challenges. Meet them upstream. Get out ahead of some of these concerns and ask people to complete this rating scale with them, this self-report. And for instance, a person might say, answer question 4, are the meds helping you? Yes, no, or unsure. Well, if a person says, no, the meds aren't helping me, you've got a meds helpful challenge on your hands, right? And we can support people through that challenge, right? So the question becomes, how can we use a checklist like this in our day-to-day practice to proactively get upstream and meet people in the nascent times of these of challenges when they're early, right? Okay. Now, I want you to meet 2 people, and both of these people are med adherent. They're both taking medications as prescribed. The first person is Bill. And Bill says, looking back, I had to find a reason to control my mood. At first, I didn't mind being in the hospital. There are nice people there too. About a year later, I crashed my car, and it didn't bother me that much, but it really bothered my family. I hated to see them worry about me. That motivated me a little to control my moods. Then I decided to go to school. And that there gave me a little more because I liked school and wanted to be able to do well. And then I fell in love, and that was another step. And to me now, I'm at a point where it's not worth it to go off these meds. It took Bill a long time to find his personal motivation to use medication. And, in some of these steps that he took, before discovering his personal motivation, it was pretty dangerous, like crashing a car, right? You could have lost him. What would have happened if we were able to meet Bill further upstream? But Bill's using meds now. He's found his personal motivation. He's real clear about what it is. Here's Joaquin. And he says, my dad takes the car keys away if I don't take the meds, right? And even though he's taking medications as prescribed, I think you can sense here that it's just a matter of time before he graduates from high school, gets out of the house and decides, I'm not taking these meds. He has not discovered his personal motivation. And so he is experiencing the motivation challenge. And this is important because you have two people who, from an objective stance, are taking meds. And too often teams go, phew, they're taking meds. And when we do a care summary and we report out at a clinical meeting or a team meeting, and we say, yep, they're taking their meds. Onward we go with the discussion. I see it happen over and over again in the clinical care calls that I run. Well, no, that's not the end of the story, because we don't know what challenge, if any, this individual is experiencing. And we proactively want to get upstream and help Joaquin before this issue of motivation becomes a bigger thing. And so when I talk to people about motivation, how do you talk to someone about motivation and medications? I say that I use a metaphor of like a running race. And I say to people, imagine that you're in a running race and friends and family are there at the beginning of the running race to cheer you on, and your heart's pounding, the whistle blows, and you sprint off, and you feel this big burst of energy. And the further you run, of course, the more out of gas you get. And it can be really hard to keep on running when you don't have enough energy, right? And in some ways, that's very much like the phenomenon of motivation, that I might get really psyched and motivated about taking my meds because I'm getting out of this inpatient unit no matter what. I'm getting out and I'm pumped up and I'm gonna take these meds. And then because I haven't discovered any personal motivation to use it other than getting out, that's a very short-term thing, I'm done and I go off. What would happen to our recidivism rates inpatient unit if we would have helped people while they're inpatient actually discover personal motivation for using meds? I think good things could come of that. So motivation challenge. This is what it can also sound like. People say things like, I hate taking these meds. Staff make me take the meds. The judge says I have to take it. As soon as I'm off this court order, boy, oh boy, you know. And also I'll get thrown out of my housing if I don't get the shot. This is all the kind of thing that it sounds like, you know, in vivo. And so having established that Joaquin is in the motivation challenge, there are key questions we can get into when we suspect the motivation challenge. And we can ask, is there anything that blank is keeping you from doing that you really wish you could do? That's a key question, right? We need to have that in our head. Is there anything that blank is keeping you from doing? So in this case with Joaquin, we could say, is there anything that trouble concentrating? That's the challenge he experiences with his mental health challenge. And so that resonates for him, right? So that's the key question. And our key strategy for supporting people who are experiencing the motivation challenge is captured in this worksheet, Finding Personal Motivation to Use Meds. Now, I do not anticipate that every day you have a worksheet in your back pocket that you can whip out when you're under a bridge with somebody and use it. And yet, the importance of a worksheet in my mind is that the worksheet teaches you a method. It contains a method, right? That if with practice, you will internalize and make part of your method. These worksheets that I'm sharing with you, and they're in the handouts, and there are about 100 of them, I think. There's a lot of worksheets. And they're in Spanish, and they're in English, and they're form fillable. So they're meant to be used. You can load them up as PDFs on your phone. You can airdrop the PDF over to the person you're working with. And you can do that when you're out and about with folks. So this strategy, so how does it work? The gist of the strategy is helping Joaquin discover his personal motivators. How do we do that? That's the strategy. My mental health challenges are interfering with concentrating when I play soccer. That's what's real for Joaquin, right? I am taking the meds so I can play soccer and help my team make state finals. Guess what's just happened? We've helped Joaquin discover a personal motivator. That meds are helping me play soccer and help my team make state finals. Okay. And if we kept working with Joaquin, we could probably help him discover 2, 3, or even 4 more. Now, this strategy worked for me. I was notoriously recalcitrant when it came to using psychiatric meds in my recovery. I mean, I did. It's only been, I think, 3 or 4 years that I've been completely off. Or as I like to say, it's really easy to go off meds. What's really hard is going off meds and staying well. That's the tricky part, right? But so how do you sustain this motivation once you've discovered it? Because he's got a personal motivator now. Right? Well, one way that worked for me, and I think works for a lot of other people too, is you take an image of your personal motivator and you pop it on your pill box or on your, pill bottle or whatever. So every day when Joaquin, takes his meds, he can remind himself, I'm taking these because I'm going to get into state finals with my team. And that makes it worth it for me, right? So that's a great maintenance. You're able to maintain your motivation using a technique like that. There's Peter. And for Peter, he just says the meds aren't working. In fact, they don't do anything for me. Just the meds are not working. I am amazed at how many people using services say that meds don't do anything for me. And then what can complicate this even more is then when somebody says, but my mom loves it when I take them, so she ought to take them because, this one can get tricky because it has a very interpersonal dimension to it sometimes, right? But this is a classic one, and it's out there a lot. No sense that the meds are working for me. And this is what we call the meds helpful challenge, right? The meds helpful challenge. So it tends to have these 2 big categories, and it raises important questions like who gets to say if meds are helpful? Now, this is a very interesting question because my psychiatrist might say it's helpful. My husband might say it's helpful, right? But I don't get a thing out of it. As this person says, my husband likes it when I take the meds. He says I'm easier to get along with, but they don't do a thing for me. This is not optimal use of meds, taking them because my husband wants me to. Because eventually I'm going to get angry enough at my husband about this that I'm going to stop taking them. And then what happens is the medications become weaponized. I've seen this play out many times within families in particular, right? Where a high school kid, in medications and gets mad at mom and, stops taking them, starts cheeking them, throws them away. It becomes weaponized. So this is a tricky one. And then the other aspect of it is, of course, I take the meds when I'm depressed. And these are about unrealistic expectations of what medications can do. I see this a lot. Medicine's not working. I take them when I'm depressed, but they don't work. Well, guess what? That's not how antidepressants work. They don't work when you just take them when you're depressed. But that's not self-evident. Right? Aspirins work that way. Take it when I have a headache. Unrealistic expectations. The meds aren't making me normal. I still hear voices. So why take the meds? Well, for many people, antipsychotic meds leave the voices intact. Right? And also this idea of the med's not working. And just as you go about your business, listen to how often you'll hear that from people. It's not working. Medicine never works for me. So what do we do? Well, we have a key question. How will we know meds are working for you? And everyone out there, and I hope there are some of you out there who are psychiatric care providers, right? Or primary therapists, right? I want you way upstream when a person's meds have been changed to ask people, tell me, how are we going to know if these meds are working for you? Because when we say to people, your thoughts will, your thinking will become, less perseverative, and people don't know what it means, right? We have to help people say, if meds are working, what do you hope will be different in 2 weeks? Okay, in 2 months, in a year. And then what we look at is, now you're starting to take the meds, and is that happening? And in the conversation, using this key question, we need to be sure to help bring the individual's expectations. I'm taking the antidepressant and it's going to make me feel happy. That's not what antidepressants do. They can't make you feel happy, but they can give you the energy to do things that make you feel happy. And so it's a great moment as you're connecting with people to begin to help to rein in some of the magical thinking that can occur with using psychiatric medications. 2 important key questions there. And here's your strategy. Again, captured in a form-fillable English-Spanish worksheet. How will I know medicine is helping me? This should be done when a person has changed a dose of medicine in a significant way, or when they have started a new medication. How will I know it's helping me, right? And you have a worksheet for people that are using antipsychotics, antidepressants, anxiolytics, and mood stabilizers, okay, depending on the class. And so here's a closer look. This should be completed with the psychiatric care provider, the nurse or the prescribing nurse or doctor. But if necessary, it can be completed with a primary therapist or another important person. Okay. The medicine I've been prescribed is aripiprazole. If this medicine works for me, I may experience some side effects within 2 weeks. This is incredibly important. I'll never forget being given my first antipsychotic, taking it and saying, oh, this stuff doesn't work, like within a half an hour. It's just like, it's not working. Well, that's not how they work. To experience the full effect, how long might it take? 6 to 8 weeks. Oh, I had no clue. And how often should I take it? Because in order for meds to be helpful, we've got to use them as they're prescribed every day. But here's the key. How do you hope this medicine will help you? And then there's an opportunity to check off one of these boxes. I want to feel more comfortable around others, and I want to concentrate better. Okay? But what are my words for this? We help people put their own words in. I hope meds help me feel less scared so that I can go back to church. That's how I will know if meds are helping me. That's how I'll know. And then we set out as partners on the recovery journey to discover if this is the case. So those are some challenges. And I'm going to stop now and invite questions, comments, thoughts, answers. And also, I want to see if we can answer my question to you, which is, where might you embed the self-report in your care pathway? And
right. Thanks, Pat, for that wonderful introduction and going over some of the challenges. We do have one question in the chat, in the question box, and there's appreciation for all the work you've done to change this paradigm of using medications. And the question is, I was wondering if not taking meds or using them intermittently fits into using meds optimally.
that's a really good question. And I think that if, in my opinion, medications, using meds optimally means using meds in a way that's planned and thoughtful with my medical care provider, right? And that because it is a partnership, and that I'm not going to be a proponent of people doing their own thing. and mixing it up with a shot of bourbon and a little St. John's wort just for safe measure. You know what I'm saying? It just, I do think that prescribing is collaborative. It's an interpersonal exchange, and I think that people, if they, and I know many people do, myself included, at various times in my recovery, found that, for instance, a PRN antipsychotic worked better than every single day, because it was just powerful and empowering to know that I could use it, I had it there, or maybe I could try to tough it out. But that I realized over time that it was important to let my psychiatric care provider know about the actual use that I was using, so that we have something to talk about. I know some people don't, but I think if a person is saying, I'm using my meds in this different way, then what's happened is that that the partnership has been broken, or it's breaking down, or there hasn't been the kind of alliance that I'm trying to advocate for here. Because this is a change. What I'm advocating for here, what I'm building here, is a method for psychiatric care providers and, importantly, the rest of the clinical team. And that's a key here. Our psychiatric care providers are way overscheduled, way too busy for their own good in some ways, right? And part of it is, what if the whole team could share the skills and the expertise to engage people? And I think that that's an important perspective, because, prescribing medicine is a medical event. Using medication is a human experience that occurs over time. And you don't have to be a medical practitioner to support people in using meds optimally. So that's a long answer, but it's a good question too.
Thank you. And several people are answering your question and acknowledging how the questionnaire can be embedded in every session, in weekly family meetings, that it really fits the definition of client-centered care and meeting clients where they're at, and that it's a beautiful operationalization of these concepts, and that these strategies are really helpful to get people to think about their motivation, and builds empathy. And some people are talking about embedding it in the pathway of the psychiatrist, because the psychiatrist needs to see it. And also using it in visits following the psych appointment to help people define how it's helping them, and what reasons they have to take them as close as possible to the start of the change.
Can you repeat that one again? I didn't understand.
So it helps people define how to tell if the medication is helping, and what reasons they have to take them.
Yeah.
As close as possible to the start of the change. So I imagine as close as possible to when that change has been made, or when that prescription has been
or
started.
at the very time of. That's the ideal.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing? And that is that I like that you guys mentioned families, because I think that that's super important. I think that these tools are, and this particular course is extraordinarily eye-opening for families. That families very often are in a primary caretaker carer role, and that families can be enormously aligned with the individual in supporting them in getting to optimal use. And the tools, I think, are helpful for families, empowering, I think. I like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've used a lot of your handouts with and your article with family members, and it's kind of been a paradigm shift for them as well, to realize that it's not just swallowing a pill, but it has real effects on people's lives, and that they're negotiating with those effects.
Yes, it really, there's a lot to it. And what's really fun for me is I've, presented some of this work at the American Psychiatric Association, and co-presented this work with psychiatrists that I know. And very often psychiatrists, will share with me that in another area of medicine, one was talking about her pregnancy, her second pregnancy with her second child, and the obstetrician wanted her to use this, but she was kind of like, nah, I'm not going to use that, but said yes when in the office with the obstetrician. And there are some elements here that are quite universal, and I'm hoping we can all relate, to the fact that wow, there's a lot more to taking meds than meets the eye, and it's certainly when we get lost in that compliance thing, then we miss so much.
Mm-hmm.
We miss if we get into talking about compliance and non-compliance, which just becomes a conflicted standoff very often, and then leaves the team saying, how do I get them to take the meds? That's a very frustrating and kind of impossible catch-22 to be in. Like, you can't get them to take the meds is the point, all right? But I think the other part that gets me about this is that, as I say, I do a lot of consulting for coordinated specialty care teams with young people experiencing early psychosis and with the clinical teams. And the teams present clinical care consultations. And it's amazing how often a person might be going off their meds, going back to the hospital, released, 10 days later, goes off their meds, goes back to the hospital. Then they start rolling out the AOT stuff, right? The involuntary outpatient commitment, and round we go. We can do better than that. Before the person leaves the hospital, how about if we help them discover personal motivation? Or what if they have a health concern that's remained unaddressed, or whatever, the issue might be? What if they truly don't experience meds as helpful? We know that about 30% of people who use antipsychotic medications have suboptimal response. Why would I risk diabetes and metabolic syndrome and all the rest of it waking for no discernible effect? Why would I do that? These are really critical questions for our field. And what I'm saying is there's so much more we can do.
Exactly. And I think related to what you're saying, there's another question. And the question is, how do we support youth to feel a sense of agency and to be active participants in making decisions around medication when what they want may be at odds with what their caregivers want?
Yeah, isn't that an interesting question? Particularly underage youth, right? So I guess that's what youth means. When you're as old as me, youth means like 25 even. You know what I'm saying? So I guess, it's a huge question, right? And so for me, there's another set of tools that we have to look at with that. And that has to do with the shared decision-making process and how to do what's called triadic decision-making, where there were two decision makers in the room, right? So there's the caregiver, the guardian parent, and the individual, the young person, and then there is the psychiatric care provider. That's a slightly different art form, but there are ways to do it, I think, and to help amplify the voice of the individual. So there are these things. Again, it's a worksheet, but a worksheet is a method for me, right? You never just throw the worksheet at anybody. But we help the person first. Let's say it's a mom and her son. We help them understand what the options for care are, what the treatment are. So it might be CBT for psychosis. It could be antipsychotic medications. It could be watchful waiting. Let's wait and see. Those might be the options. And let's say an LAI. And then we have each party, the mom and the son, rate the pros and cons of every option, but don't stop there. The key then is to get at what underlies the pros and cons that are listed by each individual. And that's when you get to value. So you ask the person, say the mom, to go back to the top of the list of pros and cons and rate each for, is this a 5 for the most important to me, or a 1 for least important to me? And that's where you get deeply into the values clarification exercise. Because decision-making is never just a rational process, right? There's a deep emotional component to decision-making. And that's why the process of shared decision-making is so important. And we'll get into that in a minute. I think at this point, if it's okay, I'd like to continue with the presentation.
Sure. And we can bank the other questions for the
We sure can.
Great.
All right, hang on to your seats, guys. We've got a couple more we're going to go through. They're good ones too. All right. These were my thoughts, by the way, on my own question prior to med appointments, intake, annual treatment meeting, but you guys had a lot of better ones too. Good job. All right, meet Zane. Zane is another one of these people who's taking medications exactly as prescribed. He's fastidious. He takes meds exactly as prescribed. He's diagnosed with major depressive disorder and has been for a couple of years, still really, really struggling and really seems pretty darn stuck and not making too much progress, although he's no longer returning to the hospital and no suicide attempts, which is important. So here's what he says to me. He says, I'm not working. I just go to the program every day and then come back home and get into bed. I don't really do anything. I just go to my doctor and he tweaks my meds. And I ask him, you said the medication has to be adjusted just right in order to be able to move ahead? And Zane says, yeah, because I have a chemical imbalance and it has to be balanced right. Right? So what's going on here? Well, the way I see it is that although Zane is using medications as prescribed, he starts with the premise that he has a biochemical brain imbalance that needs to be balanced, and that's a legitimate point of view. But where does he go with it? Every month, I go to a psychiatrist who prescribes meds to balance my brain biochemistry. Okay. Then I go home and wait for my biochemistry to get balanced. Not so sure. But the meds don't work, and I get even more depressed. And so I go back to my psychiatrist who tweaks my medication because I have a biochemical brain imbalance that needs to be balanced. So Zane is caught, despite the fact that superficially, we could be lured into thinking here's a medication compliant guy. But that's not optimal use. He is involved in what I call the passivity challenge. He's got some real magical thinking going on about how meds work in recovery, right? And so what Zane is in is a downward spiral that's actually leading him away from his recovery, not toward it. Sitting around waiting for meds to make us better is usually folly, because frankly, it's not the way they work. Just not the way they work. Okay? Here's what it sounds like. Meds haven't cured me. I can't go back to school yet because I have to have my biochemistry balanced or whatever everything has to be postponed until I'm better, till I'm all better, till I'm cured. Why can't you just fix what's wrong with my daughter? Come on, doctor, just fix my daughter, or she needs her meds tweaked. Now, this is a classic. I work with a lot of teams over the years, and teams can get very caught in this, I call it passivity contagion, magical thinking contagion, where we're in a team meeting, the person seems to be, in that recidivism cycle, in and out and in and out. And then the person has very complex needs, and we just keep sending her back to see the psychiatric care provider to get her meds tweaked. And I'm saying literally, watch out for that word tweaked. What exactly do we mean by getting your meds tweaked? I believe there's a lot of magical thinking in there. Maybe rather than getting our meds tweaked, we need a consultant to come in to help us rethink our approach, because we're stuck in a rut too. Just like Zane's passivity challenge kind of is a downward spiral, teams can catch that, right? And also begin to spiral further away from a hope-filled stance for someone like Zane. So here's how we would get to that if we heard somebody that we suspect might be experiencing the passivity challenge. We could say, in addition to meds, are there other things you're doing to help yourself? Are there other things you're doing to help yourself? And let's ask that at the third appointment, not 2 years out. Let's have that really early on. What else are you doing? Because the truth is that in order to recover, we need to get activated. We need to experience our own power to change what's distressing us, to make our lives better. Right here is where we can intervene in this downward cycle. Then I go home and wait for my biochemistry to get balanced. Well, good luck, because you could just wait and wait and wait your life away. Not how it works. So how do we help people get activated? And my preferred method is to help people discover what I call your own unique, never to be repeated personal medicine. Medicine can be what we do. Laughter can change my biochemistry. Love can change my biochemistry. Playing with my dogs, exercising every morning out in nature helps me get grounded and helps me face my day. That's powerful medicine. And it's as powerful as any medicine I've ever used. And if I don't do my personal medicine every day, then my recovery begins to not be as robust. So medicine can also be what we do, not just what we take, and that finding this really beautiful balance between our personal medicine and our psych meds can be a pathway into the life we want. So it is not an either or proposition. It is not an anti-psychiatry stand. It is not saying, flush your pills down the toilet and do yoga. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that human resilience does not stop at the time of diagnosis. Think of human resilience as the bow of one of those gorgeous Viking ships. Here comes the wave of anxiety. Ship tilts and rights itself, right? Here comes, high school graduation, and back up. That's resilience. That doesn't stop upon diagnosis. And because people are resilient, there are things that we're always doing to try to help our situation, even if it's just walking around with earbuds in. The key is that walking around with earbuds in, listening to something you're interested in, is personal medicine. It actually can help me manage distressing voices. The problem is we let people walk around with earbuds and never say, hey, how did you know how to do that? Why didn't you know that was the thing to do? I guess you don't always have to look to the professionals for the answers. There are answers in you too. That's powerful. And that's the stuff you need in order to balance the pill medicine and the personal medicine and forge your recovery into a life. So Zane, we worked with him and his personal medicine. On a good day, this was just starting out with his personal medicine. Skateboarding downtown helps me focus and forget my problems for a minute. On a rough day, taking a long shower helps me get out of bed. Well, good enough. We're on our way. We've just broken the downward spiral. We're on our way. Essential strategy, activation, I suggest personal medicine. So I have gifted you my personal medicine worksheet. You can use it directly with the individual. Never just hand this to them. You do it together. It's about the conversation. Basic formula for discovering personal medicine, what I do to feel better and how it helps me. What I do to feel better is play my sax, and how it helps me breathe if I'm having a panic attack. I just love that one. I thought that slayed me. How about this one? What I do to feel better and how does it help me? I look at pics on my phone and it reminds me of the people who love me when I'm feeling bad about myself. Wow. Powerful, portable, personal medicine. I love it. Now notice, personal medicine is what you do. It's not what you take. So smoking cigarettes is not personal medicine. Eating vegan, healthy thing to do, it's not personal medicine. Preparing a vegan meal for myself and my loved ones could be powerful personal medicine that gets my mind off my troubles, right? It's what we do, not what we take. What I do to feel better, this one was just the other day, and the guy says, I brush my teeth. And how it helps me, gives me some confidence to be around people. And at least it's the beginning of respecting myself. And boy, I could relate to that one. I remember the days when I didn't brush my teeth. Or as us Irish people say, we call it scrubbing my teeth. You scrub your teeth. Anyway, wow. Powerful stuff. Personal medicine, right? Okay, another one. This is Salima. My husband wants children. I want children. And these meds will hurt my baby. This is called the trade-off challenge. And there are two important categories within the trade-off challenge. One is health concerns. I'm concerned about how these meds are going to affect my health. And the other is the side effects issue, because it may have some wanted effects from this medicine, but it might also have some unwanted effects, right? So these are important considerations that are very real. And here's what it sounds like out in the real world. The cure is worse than the illness. On TV, the commercial said to call if my face starts twitching. My mom knows this guy who died in his sleep, and he was on the same meds as me. It's not worth taking these meds, and the meds are making me gain weight, which we hear an awful lot of these days, right? So why the commercial thing? Well, the commercial thing or the little pop up before you watch a YouTube video, you might learn about the tardive dyskinesia. And wow, that sounds really scary. And, if I take that med, and why not have that health concern, right? So trade-off challenges are really real and important to address, right up front. So here's a key question for you to consider. It seems like you're not sure if it's worth taking the meds. And help me understand more about that. Or do you have concerns about the meds and your health? And of course, the primary way to support strategy here for the person who's experiencing trade-offs is to help the person get prepared to engage in shared decision-making with the psychiatric care provider. So we're not going to do this, those of us who don't have medical degrees, we're not going to have the question, we're not going to address the issue of whether or not to switch meds or to lower the dose, because we're not medical providers, right? At the same time, struggling with side effects is a human issue, and we're fully qualified to help someone prepare to have that conversation. I like to call it prepare to participate in a different kind of conversation with the doctor, a conversation that's about the collaborative, person-centered back and forth, right? So this is the formula, the kind of question that we can help the person prepare that's captured on the worksheet. The side effect I experience is, and it interferes with, so the side effect I experience is my hands shake, and it interferes with my work on car engines. Now, the reason this particular little formula is so important is that there is a long literature and in the journals about how, quote unquote, subjective side effects are much harder to empathize with for psychiatric care providers and other care providers, right? Because they're not visible, and it's just difficult to know what it would be like unless you've experienced it, right? So I'm a big proponent of encouraging people not to just focus on the side effect, but rather to talk about how the side effect is interfering with what matters to me in my life. And that's a skill. And what I'm saying here is we can teach this skill via the worksheet with the individual. Now, remember, these worksheets are form fillable, right? And that we can work through telehealth if we need to with these worksheets. And as I mentioned, you can have them on your phone as a PDF and do them right out in the community when you're working with folks out there. And then I take this worksheet, this completed worksheet, into my appointment with my doctor. I've had a chance to do it with you, my care team, and now I've got a leg to stand on, when I go into that appointment. Did you guys know that there actually is literature that says that between the time we walk into a physician's office, and of course the warm greetings usually there, and how are you doing? That's an invitation, it's a question. When we start talking, 18 seconds. 18 seconds in a typical consult before we're interrupted by the physician who needs to get to X, Y, and Z in that short 15 minutes. 18 seconds. Now try having, your anxiety, high anxiety, disordered thinking, and try to have that, get it across in 18 seconds. So this work, I call it decision support, and helping people prepare to participate in shared decision-making with their doctor is a key function of teams. Everybody agrees that psych meds can be a great tool in the recovery process. It sure can, it can be a good, but it's just a tool. But it's really important that I get ones that are right for me. We can support people. So where in your care pathway, guaranteed, some of the people you work with will have the side effect challenge, the trade-off challenge. Where can you use it? Give that some thought. And here's a worksheet that's focused on when a person's having health concerns, right? And I think we need to be very respectful of this, because I think that, and it's one of the beautiful lessons that's coming to the fore as many of us grapple with the decision whether to be vaccinated or not, right? And we've learned that creating a shaming environment, or oh, that's a dumb question, or that's a stupid thing, or you're ignorant, or aren't you educated, and is the worst approach to supporting someone in their decision making about getting vaccinated or not. That we need to create a very respectful environment. And the same is true when we are listening to people's concerns about their health concerns and a particular medication. So in this case, the worksheet asks the medicine that concerns me. And in this case, it was lithium. And what about it concerns, what is your concern? And this person, Salima, she says pregnancy concerns me, What are your words for that, Salima? Talk to me with your own words. And the key to doing this well is we really have to focus on Salima's own words. We can't just script her. These are her words. And putting them on paper is a way to make the person feel valued and understood. Okay. So she says, I am worried lithium will hurt my baby. Pretty important concern. Then it asks what I've heard about this medicine and where did I hear it? Because increasingly, we're dealing with social media and disinformation and a lot of people. I mean, I know myself, if I'm going to take a medicine for the first time, I want to know if there are any friends of mine or family who have used it. What was your reaction to it? That's part of decision making. My sister told me no medicine, not even an aspirin, and I believe her. Okay. And then what questions do I want to ask my doctor? Right? And really encouraging people to bring their phone in and record the conversation so they can go, or bring a loved one for support in having these important conversations. Beautiful thing to do. One of the things I want to point out, what this person ended up choosing was, are there non-medication therapies that could help me now that I'm thinking about pregnancy? She had a mood disorder. But one of the questions I really like on this, and a lot of people don't think of it when it comes to health risks, particularly around pregnancy and use of psych meds, are what are the risks of not taking this medicine? Because ending up, in a manic episode is no good for a baby either, right? So these are important considerations. So, all right, we're up to questions and answers again. And again, I'm wondering, I love the meds helpful worksheets. Remember those? How will I know meds are helping me? English, Spanish, right? And there's one for antipsychotics, antidepressants, anxiolytics, and mood stabilizers. How can the use of these meds helpful worksheets be woven into your program's care pathway?
Right.
And then I also want to hear your questions, your reflections, and also your comments. Is this rocking your world, I hope? Or are you like, oh, I so know this? Or like, is this turning on any light bulbs? My mission is to take this to the world, guys, and you're some of my first guinea pigs, and I really want to hear from you. Help me make it better.
Thanks, Pat. We do have a question, and I'm hoping that we get more questions. But someone has asked, Carlos has asked, what to do not to trip the denial and miss a valuable opportunity.
What was the word? Trip the denial?
I'm guessing, and Carlos, you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe how to manage when someone is in denial about their mental health concerns. That's how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah. So we're going to deal with that one the next time we meet in July. So I really struggle with this construct of denial, and I struggle with the construct of insight. I think they're very hand-wavy ideas. And too often what I see is that when we say that someone is not taking medication because they lack insight into the fact that they're ill, this idea of insight becomes suspect to me, because it could just be that the person disagrees with us and doesn't lack insight at all. And how do we make that distinction? So the first thing I want to do in talking about in what we call insight or denial of the illness, denial of the condition. And we even have big medical terms for it, like anosognosia, which is that the brain itself, if from a biological standpoint, is blind to the illness, right? And because of the brain blindness, can't appreciate the illness. That's a very slippery slope. And if someone truly has, and maybe I can count on one hand a couple of times where I've sort of said, yeah, I kind of see this, but mostly it's that we just have very divergent, different opinions about what's working. And so I say, get the person's story. And that really, what I'll be suggesting to you in July when we meet again, is that if we're working with somebody who says, I'm not crazy and I don't need meds. Okay, cool. Help me understand what is going on when you end up back at the hospital. Well, they're just out after me and they've got it in for me. And all they want to do is put me away and take my fortune when I'm stuck in an institution. Okay. And so that's what you're thinking. And yet, I heard you also talking about the fact that you wanted to be a first responder in your community, that's been your dream. Yeah, it's what I want to do. Why? What's get off the belief? Because if we perseverate on the belief, I'm not crazy, I'm not mentally ill, and I don't need meds, all that's going to happen is if we stay stuck on the beliefs is we're going to clash. Okay? Go ahead and try to persuade someone that not to believe what they believe. You can't. What we can do, our point of leverage in that scenario, and we'll be going over this more in July, so you're getting a little preview here, is that what we can do is we can say to the person, let's look if your beliefs are out of balance, out of harmony with the values that you want to live your life by. I actually did this with someone once, and it was really a beautiful thing. It was the guy who wanted to be a first responder, and he wanted to help people. And yet he sort of had this thing happen in the middle of a grocery store checkout line, and he started hooting and hollering at his voices and scared the cashier, who called the police, and ended up civilly committed to the psych hospital. And it was mind-boggling because it wasn't what he wanted to be. So finding harmony, not saying you got to get rid of that belief, or no, finding harmony between the values I want to live by and what I believe is the challenge here. And I get it. I get that working with people, particularly for whom medication really seems to really help, and you can see this noticeable uptick in the quality of their life and of their recovery, and that can be a really difficult thing for teams to see someone who just will not take that medicine. You know, I get that. And it can lead to powerlessness and frustration. And my thing is, okay, rather than getting stuck there, I want to know what challenge you're experiencing. What do you know, what's the challenge? What's your experience with these meds been? And in what way aren't they helping? And what is objectionable about them specifically? And I mean, that's a conversation, many conversations.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's ongoing, like you're suggesting. And, you know, people are very appreciative in the chat. And, you know, to give you feedback, they're saying we need to get meds, helpful worksheets in every system of care, engaging family, individuals, peer supporters, and clinicians, advancing a common ground approach in every mental health care setting, which uses medication-assisted recovery approaches. And someone who's a nurse and says this is profound and fantastic. And they've attempted a person-centered approach to med conversations for years, but haven't had the focus that the 7 challenges framework provides. And feels like now they can say, I'd like to hear about your beliefs about the meds or the passivity challenge, and then we can talk about trade-offs. So it helps kind of also, they say that they hear multiple things at once and can struggle to make progress addressing the specific concern.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the part that's artificial about this presentation, right? I'm doing this so that we can learn together here. But then the ideal would be, after this, you know, kind of training, to sit down with some real clinical care consults, say, okay, what are we hearing here? But one of the things that I've taken to doing, and it really is extraordinary, when I'm doing my clinical care consults with the, you know, first episode psychosis teams, is they'll do a beautiful care write-up. These guys are really good at what they do. I so admire them, right? And they and they'll talk about the medications, and everyone, like I said, was like, taking the meds, yeah. And I will ask, when the time comes for discussion, I'll say, in what ways does the team see that medications are helping? And the room goes quiet. What a question. And it's a very unusual question. Again, there's just that assumption. The patient is using the meds. Shh, move on. Don't rock that boat. You see what I'm saying? In what way? And then to always ask, in what way does the individual find these meds helpful? What's their motivation for using the meds? It's a game-changing conversation. Usually the answer is we don't know. We need to find out. So thanks for those comments. And oh, by the way, one thing I do want to share is I'm building this course on my learning management system at my website. And I've put together an entire learning track of this course specifically for peer specialists. And I'm going to offer a certification to peer specialists who want to complete this and add it to their skill set that they bring to work every day. Because I just think there's such a myth out there that peer specialists should not talk to people about medications, because I don't fully, I mean, I have some thoughts about why. But I just think that that's folly. This gives an entire framework for peer specialists to use on a peer-to-peer level with people in ways that would truly be helpful around meds.
There's more comments, and you know, people are commenting on how it's very exciting to be part of this training, and this is the way my loved ones and I talk about meds and mental health recovery, and it's the way I talk with my clients. But it's hard to be heard and help our loved ones and clients be heard in more clinical settings. So some of the challenges when people don't have this information. People are excited about introducing these tools into their practice as tools of communication, exploration, and facilitation of values-driven use of medication. And yeah, just a lot of excitement about honoring personal choice, providing peer support. And someone is asking how long until the peer support certification is available. I will be in the first course.
Okay, well, my email is pat@patdeegan.com and get it to me. I anticipate that we will have it out at least, easily by October, November. We'll probably start training our first cohorts of peers. How about these meds helpful worksheet? These things are so important. How can you imagine using them? Where physically in your care, the way your place works, where would you stack them? Would they just be a digital download from your eDrive or something? I mean, what are you thinking? Because unless, this is the difference between training and implementation. Right now you're getting training, but I'm asking you to, think forward to implementation so that it's routine to use these. Where literally could you store the worksheets, or
right?
When do they get used?
People are speaking about how telehealth makes it easy to send over the internet, and I think you're asking also, like, structurally in the system or the institution or the healthcare agency, where might people be able to access these worksheets?
It's not just access, but like, when do they get used?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the trigger? In my mind, what I'm hoping that the dots that you'd be connecting would be, okay, we're using that self-report that Pat showed us in the first half, right? And someone circles, meds aren't helping me. I don't think meds are helpful. Bing, that's the trigger. Now, when does that self-report release? Okay, at every treatment planning meeting, let's say they're biannual. Does biannual mean twice a year? Twice a year. And that's prior to that, we do a telehealth, the person completes the worksheet, we've got it, and we review it together as a team, and we see, oh, here's a self-reported challenge. That would be one way.
People are saying, I can imagine sharing them with my team along with our motivational interviewing materials, using an onboarding when we talk about connecting clients with healthcare, supporting in healthcare goals, having them ready to guide case conferences with our clinical partner teams, and having the worksheets printed and available at the front desk for giving to clients while waiting for their appointment.
Oh, that's a really smart one. Just your old-fashioned clipboard, right? Mm-hmm. And you have that little self-report. And so when I walk into my doctor's office or I see my nurse, I can say, I have health concerns. Mm-hmm. Great one.
Yeah. And before treatment plan meetings, that's it.
And then that self-report then can trigger the use of specific resources or worksheets, right? Mm-hmm. That's smart.
Someone earlier commented, Pat, I know you mentioned coordinated specialty care for first episode psychosis, and so that's a team-based care approach. I know you were saying that where they're often using this, and someone commented earlier about using them within the sort of community treatment or ACT teams, and can envision within that sort of, there are specific, even more frequent ways in which those team-based care models connect with one another and communicate. And so whether it's in a weekly team meeting or a couple times a week, just whoever's relevant that came up, that you could bring that up in the weekly team meeting within early psychosis teams or in the daily team meeting within ACT teams. If there was an appointment with a psychiatrist or psychiatric prescriber the day before, then they could be reporting that kind of information out very quickly, and having the tools available for the whole team to know and everyone to be on board with it.
That's brilliant. I love that too. And it's like, so one of the things that I'm trying to get to happen at OnTrack is, they have a template for writing up the monthly care consultations, right? And I want this self-report to be part of that. So they're sure to do that with the individual that they're going to be presenting on, so that we can discuss in other words, I just think that's really just, if on your template for how an individual team member reports out at morning meeting, right, on the NAC team, are they experiencing any challenges? in using meds optimally? Well, yes, seem to be the challenges. That would be cool. Thank you. That's a great suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
I also think just as a tool on inpatient, it could do so much and feed forward into a person's transition back out into the community.
Right. And then the worksheets could actually be shared with whoever's going to continue care on an outpatient basis.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so if the person is, discharged at least with a sense of a proximal motivation for using this medicine, and that can be shared with outpatient provider, the reason it becomes so important is because, I'll be honest with you, a lot of times meds interfere with the very thing that gives my life meaning and purpose. So I remember I was an athlete as a teenager, and I couldn't move. I was on 40 milligrams of Haldol a day. I mean, you just don't move fast, right? And it wasn't good. And so, of course, you go off. Psychiatric medicine should bolster, support my personal medicine, the things that matter to me, and not block it. Because when that happens, psych meds are blocking recovery.
Absolutely.
Well, definitely get me these PDFs of these chats and comments and Q&As, because I like to study up. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we have a couple of minutes left, and I know Maria is going to close with some comments, but thank you so much, Pat. This has been wonderful. And we have had so much excitement in the chat, and these ideas are going to be applied. It seems like, starting today, which is great.
You guys see my slides okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So you should see in the chat that we've got, again, the evaluation link there. And as we said earlier, yes, it's a requirement, but it's also something we really take seriously. We really go through these, your feedback, what worked well, what are your suggestions for future presentations. So that will be really helpful for us if you could just take a couple of minutes to fill that out. And then also you can find out more about us and register for any additional resources or training opportunities at our website. I also put it into the chat as well, so you can click right on that. You can sign up for our newsletter. We're also on Twitter and send out again, this regular newsletter. And then I just want to say, Pat, I'm just, I think you and I have been on sort of the same presentation several times in different places. And it's always, it's the same theme, obviously, but just also very different. And I learned something every single time. So I really appreciate that you took the time today to share this with us. And I hope that others, and I see that others have really felt the value of what you're doing and can take these tools and put them into practice tomorrow. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Maria.
And everyone, take care, be safe, and hopefully you're enjoying some sunshine wherever you are. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Okay.